Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a day that's probably been a long time coming. We started down this path some time ago, literally. I know back in 2015 when we really started in earnest the process of getting authority through council, through legislation for authorization to update our 2008 pavement management study. I believe that was done in April, May of 2015. We actually entered into a contract October of 2015, and it was always our anticipation to probably finish the process in about 18 months. I know council's interest was in us being a little bit quicker if we could, so I think on balance we've probably got what we call a significantly completed report in about a 16-month period of time, which is longer than we would have wanted, but I think our emphasis was on getting it right, and I'll explain more about that as we go along. Kind of as I look at this issue, I always believe in giving context for things, and so just to tell you that on balance we have about 1,300 center lane miles of pavement in the city of Cleveland. I think the process that we had prior to 2014 indicated that we would resurface about $4.4 million of local resurfacing a year. And of course, during that period of time, if I had to put an average road condition pavement rating on it, I'd say it was poor at best. That was a function of understanding that doing $4.4 million a year would not put us in a position where we could appreciably improve the overall riding service. And so we knew obviously something had to occur, but I think it was good that we had the 2008 study done because it did prioritize for us where money should be spent. I think it was a transitional process, and what I mean by that was that even though we were recommending the roads that should be resurfaced, ultimately that decision was made by council of what was actually selected for each of those years, and that was up until 2014. So I think with cooperation from council leadership and the mayor, they set out on to do something with local resurfacing that we've done with a number of other elements in the city, and that is to come up with a systematic strategy on how to treat the infrastructure of the city of Cleveland as the asset it is. And the best way we determined to do that, they determined to do that, was to enter into a process that with a goal of addressing worst first street conditions in the city of Cleveland, to come up with a strategy that would do that over a 20-year period of time, with the ultimate goal of raising the average pavement rating to what we call a 75 PSR, which would be considered good road condition. So that's kind of where we've been in terms of doing that. I think the outcome of that, now kind of getting ahead of myself, but I think it's important for you to know a couple things that we kind of went through. One was to say to our consultant, not only do we want you to evaluate our pavement condition, but we want you to evaluate our road maintenance operation in terms of what are the best practices to do that. Take a look at the types of technologies and or equipment that are used to give us your recommendations on that. We'd like you to take a formal review of our specification writing process. It's kind of a soup to nuts process. And our end goal was to make sure that we were consistent with not just what met the city of Cleveland's needs, but we have a number of partners that we work with locally, NOACA, state, federal government, so to make sure that our systems and our evaluation process, our rating system was compatible with those that are used by those industries. So the commitments that we made, as I said back in 2015, when we got the authority, was that we were going to make a 20-year plan. We want to spend a minimum of $2 million a year to facilitate that plan, with the goal of getting to an average rating of 75 PCR. And then the other thing that we said was that in order to keep um, the database refreshed in terms of the pavement rating database, that we would update a third of it each year. And so the things that do come out of where we are now kind of do address those issues. And so what we did find out as a result, some of the outcomes, there are about half a dozen that I'll speak to. First is what I call a fix-it-first strategy. So we recall that what we've talked about is a worst first condition, because we had so many streets that, as my friend would know here, we are rated Fs. And so it goes without question that you should spend your time and energy kind of getting the worst of the worst done. But Fix It First not only addresses doing the worst of your street infrastructure, but it also incorporates a particular dollar amount for maintenance. And so we do have some of those elements, but it goes beyond just crack sealing and those types of functions. I'm going to let Mr. Sprons talk about those elements when he comes up and talks about it. But there are processes that should complement a certain part of your road infrastructure so that it does not fall into disrepair again. And so whether that's a way to recondition parts of the road, et cetera, those are things that we know. So the report did indicate that we should transition from a worst first to a fix-it-first process, but it also said we should do that over a 5-year period of time. So kind of keep doing what you're doing for the first couple of years and then graduate to a fix-it-first methodology. It also said that if we were to limit ourselves to a funding level of $10 million a year, we won't reach our goal. Says that in 20 years, we probably hit about 59–60% of what is required to resurface each street at least once in a 20-year period of time. And so the goal then became really, well, what is required, and then should we change the focus from not just resurfacing every street once in 20 years, but really raising the entire PCR rating to a particular number, and assume that if we do that, then the riding conditions across the city will address all the ones that really need to get done during that period of time. And so the number that they gave us is really a floor of about $12 million a year, and it does escalate obviously because of inflation and et cetera over the next 5-year period. So it would be anywhere from probably $12 to $18 million over the next 5 years in terms of what they recommend for capital commitment for a local resurfacing program. Other things that kind of jump out at us. So I kind of talked about the local resurfacing and the commitment to that. But I think as part of this process also, the pavement management system looked at our mains and our secondary roads also, and gave us some considerations for those items also. Just a reminder that I think kind of historically what we've done on the mains, I believe in 2014, and we spent somewhere around $32 million on those in 15, but I think we spent $66 million and $55 million last year. And so the bar that was set for us, actually we're actually ahead of it. So they're saying if we spend at a level of about $30 million a year, our mains will continue to be in good condition. And so we're well ahead of the pace on that issue, and we intend to continue that endeavor, that process. Just a couple of last things. So just talking about other things that they recommended to us. One was that, obviously I talked earlier about our specification process, and so they are giving us some technical specification insight in terms of things we might want to consider in terms of what's happening with kind of pavement conditions, weather change, freeze thaw, all those wonderful things that kind of result in why we have, in some respects, proliferation of potholes, et cetera. I know that Mr. Sprons, who's our director of the Mayor's Office of Capital Projects, has put into place a different type of specification for our mains that has a product that has a little bit more elasticity in it, so it has a tendency to do a little bit more give in terms of freeze and thaw. One project that we did, and I don't know how many years ago, we did about MLK through the Cultural Gardens. We did in about 4 or 5 years ago, and if you drive that street now, you won't see a pothole on it. And so that's just a function of the product that was used. It's a little bit more expensive, but we're already seeing the results. And so we've done that on a number of other streets, and that's part of our spec for mains when we do them now. So the fact of whether we can learn additional things that we're doing in the process is an important thing to us. I think as we move forward, what we certainly do have is what I would consider a roadmap in terms of how we should approach the local resurfacing program. I do know for a fact, and I think the data bears this out, that just the significant amount of streets in our inventory now that are at an F level are where we will start. We will be there for probably a little while. I think there are about $37 million in local streets that fit that criteria, and so obviously even at $12 million a year, it's going to take us a little while to get there. What I am pleased about is that we've grown from 4.4 local resurfacing in 2014. We did 7.5 in 2015, 10 million last year. This year our goal is to do 12. And so we certainly are in a position where we're doing almost 3 times as much on local resurfacing based on our ability to fund those programs. So with additional funding and a better strategy geared towards addressing worst first and then going to fix it first, we feel very confident that we'll be in a position to do a better job of meeting our own expectations and consequently the expectations of the traveling public. I think if anybody kind of looks at or compares our road infrastructure today to 2 years ago, even though there are still obviously some challenges, there has been some significant improvement that you can see. Anytime you resurface, 80 to 100 residential streets in a year, and you do several miles of mains, you can't help but notice the improvement in the writing capability. These gentlemen will talk more about the programs that we'll be doing to sustain this process, because it takes not just the capital program, but it takes a maintenance program, and it takes coordination with other utilities, both internal and external, to make sure that everybody understands the rules of engagement. As an example, one of the things we do have is when we resurface a street, we have a five-year moratorium on that street, which means I should not expect to see any utility, ours or anybody else's, coming in with a project that would require excavation on a street that we resurfaced within the last 5 years. Even to the extent that they have to do an emergency repair, there is a different restoration process for that type of utility cut than it would be for a street that's been outside that curve. If you were outside of 5 years, there's a different requirement for how that gets restored. So that's an important issue for us when we look at things like utility cuts. I'll use that as an example. A lot of concern from Cleveland City Council and residents about how much time it took to either restore the the opening itself or put on the last 2.5 inches of asphalt for the cap. So through our process, we figured out that because utilities does the lion's share of those, the city-related ones, because those are the ones our Division of Streets used to do, that process has been shipped over to utilities. They actually outsourced it, and so we have a contractor who does that restoration. He's got what I call an SLA, a service level agreement, that says within 48 hours of the time you get notice from us that this utility cut is ready for closing, you need to get there and get it completed, and they get evaluated based on that. So that's a little bit different strategy than we used in years past, and I think we've been doing that almost 2 years now. It's working very well for us. So again, these are just things that we're doing that we think make a lot more sense. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sprons and Mr. Cox. They're going to come up and make some comments, additional comments, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you may have.
Hello, my name is Matt Sprons. I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office of Capital Projects. Michael Baker, who was the consultant we engaged to do this pavement management study for us, was contracted through my office. And we are pleased to let you see that report now that it's in its final form. As Chief Brown was saying, the pavement management study is really a living document, and so it's something that as we go every year, we'll be updating certain sections of it because the pavement condition ratings constantly change. And so on an annual basis, we'll be resurveying probably a third of the city every year, and then taking that data and regenerating some of the graphs and reports and costs and stuff that are in that report on an annual basis. Also, as the chief was saying, the pavement management report is really a small component of what our overall strategy is and what the mayor's vision is for the city's transportation infrastructure system. That vision has 5 components. One is, as the chief advised, a systematic and technical approach to the way we manage our infrastructure and the construction and repair of it. And in the past, with residential streets, that systematic and technical approach wasn't always necessarily followed, so this is a little bit of a change in focus there. Increased and focused funding is the second part of our strategy. So we've been working with our partners and our funding sources to increase funding to our various programs. One, residential, as the chief said, in 2014 we were doing about $4.4 million a year. Now we're ramping up to $10 million a year last year. And as this report recommends, we may have to stretch, if possible, up to a $12 million type level. So just for residential streets, since 2014, we've spent about $33 million. And the main streets, in 2014, as the chief was mentioning, we were spending about $32 million. This year, we're projected to spend probably around $72 million on 24 different projects for mains. So from 2014 to today, that's about 79 projects, or about $230 million just in the main streets. And that's our second component of our transportation vision. The third component is new equipment and operational efficiencies, and Director Cox will touch on a little bit about that, but operations is beginning new equipment and then changing the way they operate and manage their process and their materials to make them more productive in the field. The fourth component of the mayor's vision is a new technology. So we are doing that as part of this report for pavement management. Our field people in the field are now have tablet computers that they can use to do field ratings in the field, and so they can do that in real time and then bring that data back to us, and we can upload it into the system. And so we're doing that, and then we're also just going to start working more with a CityWorks type software that'll start to integrate more of not only our work but everything in the city. And so those technology things you'll see rolling out over the next 2 to 5 years. And then also the fifth component of our transportation plan is a complete streets approach. So when we go to a street to do the resurfacing, We also make sure that the residents are aware of the 50/50 program. The 50/50 program is where the city pays for half your sidewalk repairs and the resident pays for the other half. And then we, at times, depending on funding levels, we'll have a tree damage sidewalk program where we can fix sidewalks that were damaged by trees. And so as we go through the city, we try to do a complete street approach with our other programs on those streets. And with that, I turn it over to Director Cox, and he can kind of give you some updates on the operations side.
Thank you. My name is Mike Cox. I'm the Director of Public Works for the city. My responsibility is maintaining the streets in the city of Cleveland. This is part of the overall strategy, as you know about potholes. We're now putting in our process for pothole repair, along with the $10 million resurfacing, makes it an entire different riding surface for the public. So all the things that we do with the potholes and with the resurfacing, $10 million worth of residential resurfacing, will make it a better riding surface. We are also in the process, as Director Sprons talked about, of doing the re-inspection of the streets every 3 years to make sure that the pavement rating has not gone down, and if it has, what do we do to maintain that? We have up to now, we have started crack sealing all of our streets that we've come up to 2015. We'll be doing our 2016 streets this year with crack sealing so that we can stop the deterioration, at least retard the deterioration of the asphalt. We're also looking at, as Director Sprons, some new methods by which we can maintain that surface. Again, repairing it is one thing, keeping it that way and not letting it deteriorate faster than it should is another. So our Division of Streets will be looking at that. The tablets are out there. We'll be re-looking at examining all our streets and doing those things that we need to do. So all of those things help to make this a better process and a better project. Chief?
Just a final couple of comments before I open it up to question. I do not want to underemphasize the importance of the partnership we've had with City Council leadership. Council President Kelly has been a good partner with Mayor Jackson in creating the vision for this strategy and supporting it through both legislation and the fact that it's a different mode of operation. So trying to get everybody on both sides of the hall to understand and accept that this isn't a good methodology, a good approach to how we can do things in a way that takes care of the entire infrastructure, roads in the city of Cleveland. It was not an easy thing to do, but it was the right thing to do, and we're very pleased to be in the position that we are today. The other thing that I did want to mention is Director Cox was just a little modest in his comments because they continue to look for ways to enhance the delivery of service in terms of what we do for responding to one of the elements of street repair. He mentioned pothole repair. So Jonathan, as you know, we generally enter into a contract with Patchmaster, who has the pothole killer technology, which is a way to augment our existing crews. Anyone who's seen that product after it settles understands that when it's in there, it's in there for a while. It doesn't come out. It's not like the usual things that we experience with cold patch, which is you can put it in today, it could be out tomorrow or a week from now. So I think that's a good product. We've also used a new product. It's a new type of cold patch called UPM. It's still cold patch, but it stays in, bonds a lot better, gives us a little bit more reliability. And then when, as a result of the asphalt plants closing down in December, et cetera, we have what we call Bagala machines. We have 3 of those, and that allows us to make hot asphalt in the winter for use in potholes also. So all of those functions we use to not only fill potholes, but it's a more reliable and more durable product that allows us to fix it and not have to worry about coming back in the coming weeks to surface or refill the same potholes we've already serviced. So we're a firm believer in embracing technology and best practices and learning from what others have done well and the things that have worked for us. So